looks like we have the boys club and the girls club. That's weird. Sheila, you ready?
You can't say that anymore.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting for the town of Southern Shores, a combined planning board and town council meeting. We're extremely pleased to have everybody here. We're going to talk about our land use plan update. We'll start out with what we usually start out with, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll do a brief moment of silence. Thank you very much. Council, can I have a motion to approve our agenda this morning?
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, it is my pleasure to hand this meeting over to our land use plan update consultants. Thank you.
Thank you. Does this sound like that's working? Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us out, and we'll do some introductions, and if you'll forgive us a brief presentation to kind of set the stage for where we're headed and what the next year is going to look like. And then the real purpose of this meeting is to hear more from you all about the town and to get to know about a lot more about the town and the community. And so I'll try and get there as quickly as possible so that we can hear your thoughts and ideas. This is my colleague, Andrea Radford. My name's Jay McLeod, and we work for a company called Stewart. Basically, there's just kind of a summary of what I just said we were going to do, which is have a quick discussion this morning. So Stewart is primarily an engineering, landscape architecture, and structural engineering and surveying company. Provides construction services and engineering landscape architecture, but we do have a small group of dedicated land use planners. That's us and a few other people. We are based in the Raleigh office, but we have some other offices around the Carolinas. And our particular group is housed under the transportation and planning practice area. And we focus almost exclusively on serving local governments in land use plan updates and ordinance updates. So development ordinance and regulations. So those are our clients, and those are the interests we serve, and those are the places we work up and down the coast. I like primarily to work with coastal communities because I think they have interesting challenges from a professional perspective. And so we've worked in a few communities that are CAMA land use plan communities, kind of like y'all. And so we worked in Duck most recently in 2018, 2019. And I'm happy to be back on the coast to be with y'all and learn more about Southern Shores. So this is our group, and we actually added someone yesterday, so I don't have her face on there yet, but very excited to have her join us. But like I said, my name is Jay McLeod. I have a background in science and ecology and then urban planning. And I've been a regional land use planner down in Florida. I've worked in local government planning here in North Carolina. And then I've been doing the private sector land use plan consulting. Once I saw that those people were having all the fun doing land use plan updates, I decided that's where I wanted to be. So I jumped over to Stewart and have had a great time. Jaquacia came to us. She has a bit of a transportation planning background, but also works in urban design and graphic design. I'll let Andrea introduce herself.
My name is Andrea Radford. I joined Stewart 2 years ago. Been doing land use planning for about 6 years now. Really excited to be here and working with you.
Jake has a background in journalism of all things, and then geography, and then urban land use planning. And Morgan has a background in GIS and mapping, and has done some local government planning as well in Zebulon. And in just a second, this is when I'm supposed to take a minute and get to know y'all a little bit better. So if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself and maybe tell us briefly, maybe just something that you love about Southern Shores or what you're looking forward to doing because, a little bit something about yourself and your background maybe in any particular order.
I'll start. Sorry. I'm Elizabeth Morgan. I'm the mayor. I served on the planning board for quite some time, and I was elected to council a couple years ago and elected to mayor about a year ago. And I love the town of Southern Shores. I've gotten to know a lot of people over the course of running a couple of elections. I've knocked on doors and talked to them at the doorstep and had a lot of conversations with people that live in all parts of the town. And one thing I know for sure is when you ask people why they moved here, they said it's because I love the town of Southern Shores. And so we all have that in common, which to me is a great place to start building from. So we might disagree on how to get there or maybe some details, but it's just nice to know that so many people chose to live here and they love living here. And so we're hoping to make this a part of being the better town that we want to be. That's me.
And I'm Jan Collins. We built our first house in '95. We're in our third home here. We started out in Kittyhawk out on the water, and now we've moved inland to Southern Shores. And again, love the pristineness of the area and just want to stay here. Great retirement community.
And I'm Paula Sherlock. I'm on the Southern Shores Town Council. I was elected just a year ago, I think. And I represent a number of constituencies here. I told Jay I was actually born in Elizabeth City, which makes me sort of a local. And I was a non-resident property owner here in Southern Shores for, I want to say, about 30 years. So I know what it's like to be a non-resident property owner that's subjected to the rules that somebody else makes. I'll just tell, I love living here. This was my goal. I retired 4 years ago and we moved here right away. And while I was campaigning last year, one of the things I thought was really interesting is as you walk door to door on the streets, on every street, people would tell me they lived on the best street in Southern Shores. I don't care what street it was. So I thought that was an interesting commentary on how people feel about living here.
My name is Matt Neal. I was elected in 2019 on the town council. I'm a builder in town, third generation resident, and raising the fourth generation. Very much love the town. Love to raise my kids here, start a family, and operate our business here.
Ed Lawler, we're refugees from Kerala. We moved here because of the stability of zoning. It's a residential community and never look back.
Mark Botanic, I was appointed to town council last January, I think, to fill the mayor's position. She moved up to mayor. She lived here since, again, property here since 2001, property on the Outer Banks totally since '84, native Kansans, but we lived all over the country. I commuted out of here from 26 to 220 to Chicago and all over the world with my job. But my wife and I decided this was the place that we wanted to be when we retired. And it's the only place our kids call home because they lived all over the country with us too, and they're still spread all over the country. Southern Shores is a great community. Those who've been around here all their life or who have moved in here, you got to do your homework before you come. And there wasn't any question in our minds that when we wanted to settle down totally and quit moving, that it was going to be in Southern Shores. Why do we like it? The trees, the proximity to the water, both waters as well, and also the quietness. As I talk to neighbors and friends and other folks that I meet in the town, my wife knows far more than I did because I was gone most of the time, home on the weekends. The comment I get is, hey, what can we do to be better? You know, what can Southern Shores do? And the comment I get is, how can you complain if you live in Southern Shores? Plain and simple, that's what they say. You have nothing to complain about. And when you compare it to the other municipalities, and I'm talking about from just a style of living and a comfort level, I mean, it's the place to be on the Outer Banks, in my opinion. And that's why I wanted to serve on the council, was to give back, something that we could help the council with and help the residents, take care of the residents of the town, because that's what it's all about. I do like the trees.
Okay, I heard that.
Trees are, heard that loud and clear, you may hear more. I do like the trees. I don't understand clear cutting. So, but I guess that's part of what land planning is for, right?
That's right.
We can talk about it, because I just don't get it.
Sure.
We're in a maritime forest,
Yeah,
is what we are.
well, we heard that.
Why would you want to take that away and, never mind.
We heard about the
If
trees.
you want flat land, I got land in Kansas. Trust me, there ain't nothing for miles. Good farmland. Glad it's in the family. I'm sorry.
I'm Andy Ward. I'm the chairman of the planning board. I've lived here 40 out of 68 years. I too, like Paula, was born in Elizabeth City, so I have traveled, but I tend to come back to Northeast North Carolina. And this is my home. I've raised 2 kids here, gone through school. My wife was a speech pathologist in the school system. So we know the area well. We have a lot of friends throughout the community and a lot of friends here in Southern Shores. And the people that don't live in Southern Shores that we were friends with, wish they lived in Southern Shores. Some do anyway. But I will echo everybody's comment is this is the place to be in Dare County. We have a very broad volunteer network here, the Civic Association, both the Chickahawk Association and the Southern Shores are key components to this town. And it's a great place to live, and we're honored to be here, all of us. So look forward to working with you.
Thanks, likewise.
Pleased to welcome our last member of the group today, Tony.
Sorry I'm late.
Just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Tony DiBernardo, lived here 18 plus years. And vice chair of the planning board, vice chair of the historical landmark commission.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Nice.
Not too interesting.
Okay, glad you made it.
Unless you want to hear a story.
Nice.
Thanks
Well,
for coming today. Tony. Appreciate
Sorry
it.
I'm late.
That's
yeah,
no worries.
No
Thank
worries, yeah. Thank you all for sharing that. It's nice when the council and the planning board are the biggest cheerleaders in the room, so that's awesome. It's not uncommon, but it's good to see and glad to hear. And we've actually heard a little bit about people loving trees already, so you're not alone. Heard that already, which is good. So Tony, we'll catch you up later on who we are if you're interested, but I'm Jay and this is Andrea. We can catch up maybe at the end. So to kind of talk a little bit, it looks like I've frozen up. No, I haven't. Great. So to kind of talk a little bit about what we're doing and where we're headed. First, let me tell you a little bit about what a land use plan does. So sometimes called a comprehensive plan, sometimes called a land use plan, sometimes a CAMA land use plan. And for those that can't remember that one, it's Coastal Area Management Act. It's on the bottom left there. Matt, you probably know that word intimately. A land use plan is about talking about where we are and where we've been and what we've accomplished and where we want to go. And then hopefully honing in on things that we all kind of care about instead of the things, like you said, that maybe we have slightly different opinions about. Maybe focus on the things that we all care about and then try and find a way to kind of move the ball down the field a little bit and get there a little bit better next time. So it might be, ultimately it'll help the council prioritize investment decisions and policy decisions, and it'll help staff communicate to the community about, communicate to developers and people wanting to make land use changes. It'll help staff communicate to them the priorities of the community as expressed in a land use plan. But ultimately, it'll be great, I think you'll find, to have your neighbors and your friends out talking to each other about what their shared values and goals are and learning from each other and kind of having those conversations. Because you don't just naturally have them necessarily all the time. And it's kind of good to have kind of a check-in and an ability to kind of do that once every now and then. And we'll probably touch on some of these other subjects in some fashion or another along the way. So these are just kind of an example. of what we might be going through. And also, kind of to your point, Mark, very recently the state passed some legislation called Chapter 160D. And as part of that legislation, it requires any community that wants to do zoning to have an updated land use plan. So this will help us fulfill that requirements, have a current land use plan, and be able to keep doing zoning in the way that fits Southern Shores. In addition, the state also, by way of a federal act in the mid-1970s, requires local communities that want to have kind of control over land use decisions and CAMA permitting, Coastal Area Management Act permitting. We need to have a land use plan that meets the standards in the state statutes of being a CAMA plan. And there's a few things that go along with that, the information you have to look at and analyze and bring forward, creating shared community vision and goal statements, and then having land use management topics or recommendations, we'll sometimes call them, that kind of address these 5 topic areas: public access, land use compatibility, infrastructure carrying capacity, natural hazards, and water quality. And basically what it does is that as part of this process, we will make sure that we check those boxes and have a plan that touches on those points so that it's compliant with the state's Coastal Area Management Act and can serve that purpose for the town. But also, we're going to make sure we also have those other things that are more important maybe to other local perspectives and that aren't necessarily as concerned with that. And so if I didn't touch on it before, the Coastal Area Management Act kind of helps. It's the way the state tries to encourage people who live on the coast to take care of shared coastal resources, like estuaries and salt marshes and things that people from outside those communities experience and enjoy and value. Things that support fisheries, which are other, economic engines for places more than just the town that happens to be next to it. Anybody have any questions about CAMA or the comprehensive plan, kind of land use plan process? Y'all probably deal with it more than others, so you'll have to forgive me if you hear a different version of this evening when we have the broader public meeting. So another thing I wanted to kind of do from the very beginning is kind of make a distinction. We're going to be, although the land use plan may make recommendations about zoning or indicate a direction that the town could go to update zoning, we are not going to be talking about zoning necessarily, right? This is about the future. It's about future land use. Future land use will help guide rezoning decisions made by council. The state says we have to consider a future land use map if we have one when we make rezoning decisions. It doesn't say you have to follow it. It says you have to consider it. It's one of the pieces of information that you consider as a planning board or as a council when you're making a rezoning decision or other land use decision. So we're going to be talking about future land use. You already have an adopted future land use plan. There's a picture of it. You've probably dealt with it before. So that just to make that distinction kind of early on is we're going to have to zoom into the sky, look into the future. The future is a little fuzzy. It happens over decades. It doesn't happen right away. We're not going to be talking about rezoning people's properties during this process, although it would probably get more people out to meetings, but we're not going to talk about it. So, and then just kind of to hammer that home a little bit more, zoning is like the law of the land. It's what you have to do. It's the bar you have to limp over to do stuff in town. And then future land use is kind of our aspirational goals. It's not handcuffing decision makers. It doesn't actually take action. In some instances, that may be a bit of an oversimplification. Like if you have depending on your rules for special use permit or quasi-judicial review, and Wes would know more about that, and he'll let us know if we hit something. But just to kind of as a broad generalization, we're going to be talking about future land use. It's not regulatory. It's what you might consider advisory to future regulatory changes. But that would take action. And the process of going through and adopting a land use plan is a legislative action. So ultimately, it goes through just like any rezoning or text amendment. It'll come to the planning board for a review and recommendation, and then it'll go to the council for review and adoption or with changes or whatever. So ultimately, what we're talking about is a public hearing, the legislative adoption process. It's no different than that. But there's a little bit more public involvement and other information that goes into building it. So kind of as an overall project timeline, we're in the beginning. Andrea and I and the Stewart team like to kick off our comprehensive plan updates right from the start by going to the community. We do as much information gathering as we can up front, but then we like to come to the community, get to know it, see it, talk to the people that live here, and then have a public open house as soon as we can, so that we can get people who live here to know that they're involved at the very ground floor, at the very first step, and the information that we can gather from that, we can use to craft the plan development process moving forward. We can use that to create a more customized public survey about goals and values. We can use it to kind of customize the information we look at and share in these maps, because ultimately the body of knowledge that we build in the beginning part of this process is kind of the foundation that we stand on when we look to make recommendations to chart an alternate future or the same future or whatever that future becomes based on how it evolves through the public survey and the goals and the vision and what we hear from the people. And just, we'll see how things turn out, but it seems like people are pretty happy with Southern Shores the way it is. So I wouldn't expect any major course corrections, but I'm not going to make that call just yet. We'll see when we keep hearing from more people and see what they say. The project schedule in a little bit more details like this. You can see we've had a couple of meetings already. We had a kind of just an administrative kickoff meeting to talk about procedures and process and locking in this room and stuff like that. We've had a couple of focus group interviews via Teams meetings. I think you were in the first one. All right, good to have you here. Thanks. And then there's a series of meetings moving on. We haven't really set the dates yet, but so for people to kind of like generally know when things are going to happen, we're going to be making sure the project website is updated and the information goes out to advertise these as soon as we can. But these dates aren't locked in yet. But generally speaking, you can kind of see how those might line up in the months to come. This is, since this is a CAMA plan process, there's a state review process by the Coastal Resources Commission. The Division of Coastal Management administers the review of these plans. And that can take a little bit of time at the end, depending on how things go. It's our job to make sure this plan meets the requirements of a CAMA land use plan, but ultimately it's the reviewer's job to decide if we have met those requirements, and that may involve a little bit of back and forth at that point. And so the way this is structured is the plan will kind of get finalized and rolled out at a public meeting, probably in March, April, and that'll be when we kind of come back and have another public meeting and say, hey, here's what this plan is recommending, here's what we heard, did we get it right? And if there's any changes need to be made, then we make those. Then it'll go to the planning board ultimately for review, and forwarding, I guess, would do at that point to the Coastal Resources Commission for their review. And then pending that and any cleanups that happen then, that final product will be packaged and brought back to the council for their ultimate review and approval. Any questions about the schedule or anything like that while we're going? Okay.
Is the CAMA review in the office in Elizabeth City or Raleigh?
I believe we are in the Elizabeth City office. There's 3 up and down the coast. There's one in Elizabeth City, one in Morehead City, and one in Wilmington. So I think we're the Elizabeth City one.
Did Duck, when you did theirs take their review, take any plus or minus on that 75 days?
Yeah, it took a little bit of plus.
Okay.
It took about 11 months.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was surprising to
And
say
you
the
were
least.
surprised, okay.
Yeah. The one, the Carolina Beach one we had, I was just kind of sitting around and the planner called me out, was like, oh, by the way, did I mention we got approved last week? And I was like, no, you didn't mention that. It took about like a month and a half, 5-6 weeks.
Oh.
The one in Swansboro was about the same way, a month or so, and there were no kind of follow-up comments. But the Elizabeth City review for Duck used the full length of the review period several times. And so it took a lot of time for them to get comments back to us. When they got the comments back to us in the town, the turnaround was like usually a week to 10 days. But when we got our stuff back to them, it would take, 2.5-3 months to get the stuff back. Yep. So variable.
Mhm.
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll have a couple plans here being reviewed by the same office in the next few months. And so by the time spring or summer rolls around, I imagine we'll have a much better idea of what variability might look like for us. For the planning board members, in your role as our steering committee, like most planning boards around the state, you have been identified in your ordinances as being responsible for occasionally reviewing the land use plan and making recommendations to the council for any changes that need to happen. So in your role as that, you're going to be our steering committee. Forgive me if I call you the steering committee occasionally and not the planning board. But thank you, by the way, first of all, for donating a little bit extra time out of your lives to help us in this process. I know that you have a lot of demands on your time, even just being on a planning board alone. But this is kind of what we'll be involved in. Andrea and I, or someone from the team, will come here. We'll share with you what we've been doing, and we'll share information and get your reactions to that. There will probably be more stuff to read as moving forward in the future, and kind of comment on and help guide the direction and steer it in a way that really makes sense for the town and the people that you know and the perspectives that you hear from. Hopefully you'll be able to share some information with those people and get their, feedback and bring that to us. And then, we'll be here. We'll gather that information from you and from any other people that we meet with, and we'll take that back and then just, work away on our computers for a bit until we head back out here to share that information again and make sure that what we heard was what you said. And then that'll help guide the direction of this plan in a way that will tailor it and customize it to your town. And so thanks again for being that, and hopefully you'll be happy to be ambassadors to the plan as we move forward. And so specifically today, though, it's kind of just an open roundtable discussion. It's just a work session. You're not being asked to take action or do anything other than share your thoughts and ideas. Andrea's taking notes. I'll be taking notes, and we're just kind of trying to get a feeling for the things that you think are important and that you think this plan should move forward in the future. We know that some things are already problems and have been for decades, and maybe will continue to be for decades, like the traffic on Dogwood Trail. So we've got that on there, and we'll keep it in the plan, and we'll see if we can't help move that conversation along. Just from knowing how long y'all have been dealing with that, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be solved this go round, but I know you're working on some things and putting some ideas out there about different alignments and so forth. And so we'll find out more about that as we move on. But at that, I'll just kind of pause. And I think if you want to kind of just go through these one by one, we can share these and kind of talk about what we value. We're going to be doing kind of a similar exercise with the staff in just a little bit, starting at about 11:30. To kind of get a little bit more of their perspective from organizational and, implementation and boots on the ground kind of perspective. And then later we'll be going on a tour of the community with Wes to see the places that we talk about now in this meeting. And then our public open house will begin at 5:00, and we'll get to hear from people there, hear their perspectives. So if that's all right, I'm going to kind of just step to the side, and I'm going to be here to listen and take notes. If anyone wants to kick us off, that's great.
So you want to start with values and priorities?
Sure. I think we
That's
kind of
a good
probably
place
already kicked
Kind
that
of
around a
start
little
on
bit. Yeah.
that. So in addition to trees, I'm sure you hear this all the time, just a general heading of water quality, both for the environment, recreation, access. I mean, just everything that you could sort of subhead under water quality.
Is there an identified problem or concern or issue that we have lower water quality than maybe previously or than other jurisdictions?
I would say that over the years, I've heard concerns about sound accesses being closed periodically for high coliform counts.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I've heard over the years a general concern about what are septic systems doing to our water quality? Just in the form of a question, most likely. Those are the two things that pop into my head right now about water quality. But I know people have expressed not really a concern, but just I don't know, something, I mean, it's something they cherish about the reason they came to live here. In addition to the trees, it's the water that we live around. And I think, they're interested in making sure that whatever we do doesn't negatively impact the waters.
Going along that line, it's agreeing on an indicator that everybody accepts for water quality on the inland waterways. What parameter are we going to use or can be developed to quantify going forward? More houses get built and more streets are built, and it's going to affect the water quality.
Well, I'll go off in a little different direction. I think one reason a lot of us and a lot of other people that live here chose to live in Southern Shores is because there was a value placed on low-density, single-family housing with very little commercial development. And I don't think, I would think that's a value for the community that we don't want to change. Now, we need to update things or take a look at, where the world's going and how we fit in, of course. But I think that's kind of a commitment that runs with buying into this area. It's not Nags Head, it's not Kill Devil Hills. I mean, those are lovely places also, but this is really different.
Where do y'all do most of your day-to-day shopping? Out of town? Is that fair to say? No?
No,
In town's got everything you need.
most of us don't drive across the bridge very often.
Only we have to.
You're right. I got a car that's never been across the bridge.
Yeah, but just across the highway though, I mean,
That's out of town.
That's out of town.
It's a big deal to drive to Nags Head to go to Fresh Market, I can tell you that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
See that.
Yeah, it's all of like 12 miles or something.
But jumping back in on the septic concern, I mean, we were fortunate enough when the mayor was on the planning board that we passed some pretty stringent restrictions on septic capacity. So that has helped in the thought process of
And density too.
and density, exactly. So I think the community was behind it about 99%, what we did. And it's a huge step in the right direction for keeping the septic capacity in check in vacation rental homes. So.
I remember those signs from a couple of years ago, the no new hotel signs up and down the street.
There's still a few around.
Tattoos.
Longer than 90 days, by the way, but we will go into that.
Well, y'all are,
The water quality, I would agree with that. It's a question. I tell nobody to swim in the canal.
Yeah.
We live on a canal and I tell them, don't swim in there. Okay, it's not for swimming. The sound is, okay, just make sure you don't open your mouth. For kids and you're boating, but I've often questioned the septic system, and I've been on septic systems in other states as well. And my first question is, where are the laterals? When I want to know how close is it to the canal, how far away from that, and whatever. And some people have septics in the front yard, some of them have septics in the side yard, the backyard. And everybody just says, well, where's it going? Well, nature's taking care of it, I hope. And we have great pumping companies here who make a fortune pumping as well. So the water quality is a concern. We have high iron content in water you can't change. All you have to do is look at some of the sprinkler systems around town and what they've done to property, driveways and things like that. So water is always a question. From that point of view, share Paula's viewpoint. I mean, it's, as I read the history of the town and how it was set up by Mr. Stick, you know, low density, that's what attracts everybody, wants to be here. I mean, you have a refugee from Kerala for that region. Probably. I mean, it's, I just found out where he lives. I wish I had his house. He's got a huge yard. It's the park. It's the park. So, but those are really important qualities that we don't want to, and the safety. And then the last thing is commercial. I like the way the commercials at one end of town. We're not, gosh, when you go to Mineral Hills and some of them, gotta have it, I know. But they're squeezing a Wawa into a site that I know Wawa wouldn't take up north. But they're squeezing it in down there. And I just like, we're very careful with commercial. The planning board is very, very careful with commercial, and I think we need to continue that as well. Okay. It doesn't seem to detract from people wanting to live here. Right. Because there's enough commercial somewhere else, even though we do travel out of the district.
Well, we also have, I'm sorry.
No. I was involved with testing the water quality for a couple of years. Actually, my wife was, and I was the one that would take it and go into the water and get it. But anyway, the results were, it varied all the time. Most of the time, that water quality, you shouldn't go into it, you know, unless you want to glow in the dark. But one of the results were, they said the results were septic systems along there, there's leakage, and also fertilizer. Because they said when people do the lawns, if one fertilizer might be okay, but when you're all along the canals, this fertilizer is different than this fertilizer, and when they both go into it, into the canals and the water and the sound, you're getting a mix that's causing the problems. So it's just to what goes on. They don't do it any longer, and they know. I think they said we don't want to do it anymore, and they actually had a sign up at one time not to go into the water, and that was taken down. But I just wanted to make you aware that this is one of the things with the water quality, the results of a couple of years of testing, and this is what they said after a couple of years of testing was the problem.
I think TISA left, but I think getting back to values and priorities, I think the fact that Southern Shores is a community where we have a lot of dedicated green space that is not going to be developed because the Civic Association owns it, and they maintain it. And we have ocean accesses that are maintained by the Civic Association. And, you know, we have towns, as you know, where you don't have ocean access unless you live in a particular subdivision. So I think I think we're very blessed to have that. And I think that's something we want to protect.
To jump in with what you're saying, Paula, I mean, the Civic Association, the main Southern Shore Civic Association is the big one. The Chickahaw property owners is the small one. Fairway Drive is, and there's smaller than Chickahaw, but Chickahaw and Southern Shores own the bulk of the common area in Southern Shores. And it's a great setup. The town doesn't have to pay hardly any to maintain it, but I think that if we're looking long range, which this is what we're doing, we should be thinking about maybe doing a joint venture with the associations and the town. And possibly, I mean, we've been talking about this for years. I mean, Matt was probably still in grade school when we first started talking about a civic center in Southern Shores. Well, there's a giant piece of property that is over in Matt's neighborhood that could be advantageous going forward with the town sharing, you know, with the civic associations to enhance property that residents may see as beneficial later on. I'm not saying next week or next year, but it's something that we need to at least consider and maybe put out in the long-range plan, if amenable with the civic associations, that we should get together possibly for a project at some point. I don't know what that project is, but I know at one time we were actually talking about a civic center on
Or even
association land.
marshaling the town's resource to assist them to properly utilize some of that
Yeah.
vacant space that they own. I mean, when I was a kid, you didn't worry about bike trails or anything because there wasn't enough traffic and there's enough vacant land. We just did whatever we want, run around. Now, mobility through town, a safe mobility to get through these green spaces and linking them in a cohesive way, I think would be a major opportunity for this land use plan to finally, as we're reaching a maturation stage in our development, where it's getting pretty well built out now, we need to start thinking on sort of a master plan basis of what we can utilize with what's left to provide more benefit to our citizens.
That and more boat slips. I mean, there's a big backup on people waiting to get boat slips that we need to incorporate how we can, enhance the marina or develop a new marina area.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's a good point too. It's a real asset to the town to have that accessible to residents and members of the civic association.
Exactly.
One of the things I think a lot of people cherish here is the wildlife.
Sometimes.
They won't get out of the way. It
When it's
depends
not
on the point of
eating.
view.
I mean, oh my
Until they eat your
And they eat
dog.
the flowers and everything else, and buy the deer off. But anyway, they do, people just marvel at the wildlife, plus and minuses both ways. And, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to not only that, I mean, somebody said they saw a coyote the other day, I thought it was a big deal. To a lot of people, it is a big deal, okay, because coyotes are predators, but it's the natural order that goes on. So, but I think that, you like them and you don't like them, but somewhere in that land plan, I mean, everybody says, where are they gonna live? They're building out. Well, like Matt said, there's tons of the area, the Southern Shores and Chickasaw, the association's own. So that wildlife just go hide in there. They just move to the next lot. That's that hasn't been cleared yet or something's built. So it's a calling card, it's a value, and there are people that don't want anything to die. So we just need to keep that in mind.
Haven't we been designated as a monarch flyover?
Model what?
The
Monarch
monarch
butterfly.
butterfly. So we have other things besides coyotes. We have monarch butterflies, we have
Yeah.
bird life.
I was actually thinking maybe the wildlife is a way of just rebranding the beach rats into something that's like adorable. Could be a tough sell probably.
Could be.
So let me get a few things straight in my head. Does the town maintain the canals?
Yes.
The town maintains the canals, the marinas are maintained by SSCA. Okay. And the SSCA and CPOA maintain a lot of green spaces and parks, and beach walkovers. And then there's a number of trails and bike trails, particularly like along that side here, that run through, but those are also privately maintained.
Most of them, yeah.
Most of them.
I'd say most of them.
And then we have the regional bicycle plan done almost a decade ago, which showed linkages between those areas. But then I think it also said at the same time, but all this land is privately owned, so good luck doing it in town, right? So there are a lot of challenges to linking together the public and private. But the civic space was also something I think we heard in the stakeholder groups.
Well,
earlier
you look at, you're familiar with Duck, the amphitheater there. I mean, wow, what a great venue that is for, all kinds of stuff, the Duck Jazz Festival. I mean, I'm jealous that our town doesn't have anything close to that. And, it's a very simple building with a cover and a great, asset in the Duck. And we don't have the land, the town does not, and probably doesn't want to buy it, but a long-term lease to put something on there that would fulfill the, desires of future residents here would be good.
I've had conversations with people about the idea of more community events, if you will. It's been, numbers of things have been mentioned. A place for artists, because we have a lot of artists in our community, a place for them to gather and show their art. That's the first time I ever really thought about it specifically, some sort of an event space kind of thing. But I definitely have heard from many folks. One of the most popular things that we do here every year is the surfing competition for the kids and the annual Kitty Hawk Elementary School get together, the fair, the fall fair, that kind of thing. And again, it's things that this idea of community. We have some things in Southern Shores, but people are, I think, are interested in maybe building that up, having more opportunities for that.
A lot of that is done by the civic associations. I mean, they hold these different get-togethers and what's happenings. I mean, SSCA does, it comes out
Right.
every month, on which, there's lots of opportunity to participate, but it's supported by the associations, not so much.
It would, as Andy has pointed out, it's something that the town would need to partner with.
Yeah.
In order to make it happen. And, we're doing more than I think we were doing because we have a great civic association and we have interest. But it would be nice to, especially down, when you think about long-term, what do we do in the future?
Yeah, the Jazz Festival up there is supported. It's also in the middle of the commercial district.
Yes.
Which the merchants do support through their taxes and through their rent they pay. And
Yeah.
the landlords pay into that. It is a draw. There's no question. It's right in the heart of the commercial. You couldn't get any better location. It's just ideal and up against the sound as well. I mean, it's pretty nice. Maybe we could turn the pit center into something. We talked, don't know. It's what we have here. Anyway.
Going back to the canals, I don't think that they've been addressed or not developed, but utilized as a viable means of transportation with more and more people having canoes and kayaks. The importance of the canals is being safe if you fall out of your canoe. So that goes back to water quality, and I can see where that access should be protected going forward.
Well, when we were on the Civic Association together years ago, we did a lot of testing. You did, and down at the Sandside Wading Beach, and we were kind of leaning towards our northern neighbor pushing their stuff out and coming our way. Barrier Island up in Duck was, we kind of theorized that was.
But we were doing intensive sampling, and nobody else was, so we were getting the numbers and they weren't. But also, like I said earlier, we got to get it on some kind of, and I don't think it's developed yet. We need to get the state to develop a reliable indicator. Because we were chasing our tails. It's sky high one day, it's gone the next. So, we're using the right, but the state, I think, has been trying to develop that kind of stuff, but it's expensive, and it's got to be, something's got to be used that most people can agree on as a.
So what were you were sampling on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and you were checking for fecal coliforms? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and, but we were doing more intensive sampling during the warm months and then tapered off during the winter. But we also had the highest counts in the summer months.
But this was the Civic Association. This wasn't
Right.
town. gave
Right.
results over to the town, but it was all civic association, driven mainly for the wading beach at that time.
Yeah, but then we went into the canals and tried to do like a random sampling in the canals, which is good. What I'm saying is all of that feeds out to the sound, or the sound feeds into the canals. But the canals need to be viewed as a viable recreational pathway. Because everybody's got paddle boards and kayaks and canoes now, far more than they did 10 years ago. Before it was boats, but
Does the town do any water testing at all?
just what the state does.
Not that I'm aware
Yeah.
of.
The state, I think, still does
The
the
state
grading
does.
beach and the sampling cycle.
Maybe that's a
Yeah.
goal that we need to address as far as, getting some, short run, getting a grant from the state to test our water periodically, and have a program where people can check online and say, well, my canal's toxic, don't fall off.
So let
What's
me,
an exit use? Because they're always closing something down there.
They do that within the
Is that the
town.
state?
No, They've got their own testing.
Yeah,
And they
it's
do-
an outflow to the ocean
Okay,
too.
all right.
I don't think we have that problem, outflow here, that I'm aware of.
Just a bridge.
so a couple of things, just something I learned. It's important to distinguish between environmental water quality and drinking water quality.
Yeah.
I made that mistake once. Certainly.
Drinking water is great.
Yeah. There was a study done, I think, in 2015 or so, maybe it was 5 for sure, so maybe it was 2005, in Bow Banks, on the backside of like Emerald Isle, Atlantic Beach, that kind of area. And they found a seasonal peak in nutrient water pollution based on basically tourist season, high tourist season. And that's all septic, so the splushes going into the back bed, basically. And that was one of the things we were concerned about as well, because you all in this part of the state are kind of at the center of relative sea level rise. Because not only is the seas rising, but also the ice caps are melting and the earth is subsiding. And so you're not only is the land sinking a little bit every year, but water is rising. So that means that every year the free water for septic treatment is reduced. And so you're getting more and more likelihood of marginal septic treatment occurring before it hits the groundwater table.
Much of that is in the older systems. I mean, the newer ones have quite a bit more separation than they were allowing prior.
Okay.
And I mean, you'll see, not so much in town, but in other parts of Dare County, a lot of those older 80s, 90s systems are in the water table at this point. But anything that's been new or improved, they're pretty good about keeping that separation still.
Okay.
So, and
What's the separation at?
30 inches. 30 from the pipe to moist soil. Do you remember when you're doing your soil? The New Brunswick bed, I'm trying to remember exactly, but it's changed. And they're a lot stricter about it than they
It used
used
to
to be.
be 12 inches.
Yeah, but it's gone up but I can't remember how they determined it on that Brunswick bed.
When you say the new start, I like this, I've heard about engineered, like.
Well, the engineered systems,
They're different.
theoretically, you could drink that water, but it's, I wouldn't encourage you to. But what they've done now is if you're putting a system where fill is required above a certain bedroom count, it has to be an engineered system. So it's taking some of those high volume houses offline. And then your standard 4-bedroom conventional system, they've got pretty strict separation rules.
Okay, well, that's good.
And that's changed just in the last 5 or 6 years.
And don't the engineered systems require monitoring?
Yeah, they have a maintenance
So
program.
there's an independent monitor required and report. So that's a little bit of a move forward.
What I was getting at, well, the other part I was getting at, we don't really have much control over that. I mean, it's regulated outside of the town body, so it's, we can watch what it's doing to our water quality, but we can't do much about it.
Is there a grant program for septics that are, say, 20 years older? Because that's basically the lifespan, I understand, that where the fields usually are compromised and they need to be replaced. I mean, if there was some type of grant program out there for older septics, and maybe that's something the town then could look to see what, properties are affected by that, and just again, throwing out ideas, along this water quality. and septics that are looking to fail.
Nags had an initiative similar to that. And
Oh, they
I
did?
honestly don't think it got a lot of traction, but Cliff would probably be able to speak better. Where they're encouraging people to have their septics evaluated and offering programs that one in place.
Well, if there
It's a
was a
good idea.
grant, I mean, if there was money available, I know there was just something out there about roofs. People who went to this new 40-year roof with stainless steel nails, they got $6,000 towards the payment of their roof. My neighbor, whose roof was maybe 5 years old, replaced it completely because it was free to her, So, I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's apparently stuff out there and I'm not aware of it. So that's why I thought, if there is anything.
Just change it a little bit on a different subject. In addition to the green space owned by our civic associations, there are a few privately owned pieces of property in town yet to be developed. And the one thing I definitely have heard over the years is we love Southern Shores and we don't want it to change. So one of the things that would implement change is when these undeveloped properties all of a sudden are no longer on the track of being undeveloped. And we do have a few. We also have some properties that are under one type of use now, but could change. And again, going back to Amy's comment of thinking about 5, 10, 30 years down the road, how different would our town look? And one of the things that comes to mind is these undeveloped properties and the uses of them.
We'll have to get you to poke at some of those on map, show us so we can work on that.
Okay.
And maybe Wes knows what you're talking about already.
Yeah.
They all border 158.
Except for the golf course.
Yeah, so, yeah, true.
Oh, okay.
You just made me think about potentially looking at some kind of conservation use rather than having some of our green spaces just in an RS1 as a generic use term, but having some of it actually, this is a dangerous road to walk down, but as a conservation use, so it dictates it has to stay open space, even though the rules in place right now to get it developed would be almost impractical to navigate. It'd be nice to have it secured.
Right, like through the future land use map.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right, it is a tough line to walk. But luckily, these places seem to be marginal to begin with. So,
Yeah, and because they're owned by SSCA, just trying to move forward with the development is almost like herding cats, but
Yeah,
because
and I
of
think,
voting about.
yeah, and the SSCA survey results that were shared with us said that basically one of the lowest priority grades of raising funds was through the sale of existing properties that SSCA owns. So that's a nice place to be.
Yeah,
I think that's generally agreed. I mean, everybody's happy with that. I don't think there's a huge move to try to mobilize and develop that property.
change is hard is definitely a motto of this town. So, yeah, I would go along with that. Yeah, just put it right there.
We prefer not to. Thanks.
Well, going back to, what Elizabeth was saying, as far as the properties that are out there that are large tracts. I mean, there's one that's 7 acres, owned by an individual family. And it's going to impact what the corridor coming into our town looks like down the road. And on our agenda, the planning board's agenda this month, and I think I'm going to talk with Wes about this, is architectural standards. We're beginning to talk about architectural standards, but I don't know if, this month's planning board is the time to devote a whole lot of energy to architectural standards until we move a little bit farther down the process with this long range plan that we're starting on. So, but it is on there. We're not imminently concerned about anything going sideways, but we got to be thinking about it. But I'm not sure that our planning board meeting this month, we should dig in whole hog
Well, I mean, the aspect of our commercial district, number one, you always hear exactly what Mark said, which is everybody likes the fact that it's concentrated on the south end of town. But the other aspect of it that we haven't talked about much, either as a council or a planning board, is the age of those developments.
Or
And-
redevelopment.
Yeah, and so, and it's just like what's happening right now with Marketplace, it is in the process of being redeveloped, and that's just a portion of it. So that still leaves more in Marketplace, plus the other areas in town. So I hear what you're saying, don't want to get too far down the road, but I think it's something real that we really haven't spent much time with at all. And I think we would be served well if we did think about it some.
But this is going to get us a lot more down the road
Yeah.
as far as architectural standards. I doubt town council would pass anything before this got completed.
Right.
But it should be part of this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The-
I mean, we'll start on the discussion because I kind of tasked our members on the planning board to be prepared to have 5 things that they see as problem areas that we need to address moving forward. So I gave them a homework assignment. We tabled last month's meeting. So, yeah, I guess we'll talk about it, and I'll remind everybody that there's some homework out there.
So I was sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we talked about small areas of commercial development, but they really should be, I think, more attractive and vibrant areas of commercial development. We talked about community events, and in a lot of communities, I don't want to use the word shopping malls, but, they have events and they do things. And I know we don't own these places, so we can't tell people what to do. But we also, I think, probably haven't really encouraged our owners of commercial property to work with the town in making this an ever more attractive and vibrant place. And, I think the fact that Coastal Provisions has been closed for as long as it's been closed, and that was an area gathering place, a place where people went, and we've lost that. And no offense to the escape room, I think it's probably fabulous, but it's not aesthetically adding much to the community. So again, we don't own those properties, so maybe we could cooperate with the owners and stress the need for community, the Christmas events,
So
for instance.
what do you mean by vibrancy? What does that mean to you? Like, I know what it means to me. What does it mean to you?
Well, we don't want it to be too vibrant.
This is a retirement.
Yeah. We don't need those problems. We don't need nightclubs open at 2:00 in the morning. We don't need that.
So not nightlife necessarily, or not late nightlife, anyway.
But, events,
Matt would like a hot dog stand, that I
Okay.
I mean, we just allowed produce stands in town,
Place to host like a farmer's market, or a seasonal
Right.
gathering, if there's a Santa Claus with bring the kids and take pictures.
Right. where you have people going in and out and events for kids. Boy, I think we're really lacking in events for kids.
So maybe a Sugar Kingdom.
That's not for kids.
Wait.
But I say that facetiously, but I mean, you're being idealistic thinking that a property owner is going to be a good steward to the town when that property owner doesn't live in town. And,
Right.
we have to be realistic how much standard we can put out there. We
Yeah.
can ask and cajole all we want, but, a Sugar Kingdom, ask Kitty Hawk, they couldn't do a daggone thing about
Did you say a Sugar Kingdom?
Yes.
Like a candy store thing?
Yes.
it. Yeah, so just starting one.
It's not,
Basically,
that's not
one
ours.
outskirts
It's
of our
not,
town.
it's not.
That's
Southern
not
Shores.
ours. It's going to be real close to us, but
Right here.
It's just
Yes,
on our
it-
border.
It is on our border and it could be in our town.
Yes.
well, and some of the owners don't live here, but some of the owners do live here, and they are part of our community, and they have made a significant amount of money in this community. And I think at least some outreach to them to say, One of our goals is to have a more vibrant, attractive commercial area. Can you talk about that?
Couldn't agree more. It's just hard.
Oh,
I mean, our packet that Wes gave us for, planning board discussion on architectural standards is lengthy. Cliff's been through it at Nags Head, and, you talk about property rights all the time.
I do.
And, we can't legislate pretty. Unfortunately, that's a reality.
Well, we can make it a goal.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I was going to wait to the end, towards the end of the discussion to say this out loud, because this is an idea I've floated around at some point in time. But I kind of like driving through small towns in North Carolina that have the little decorative flags on the poles, on whether it's the utility pole, the traffic light pole, whatever. And there are certain communities on the Outer Banks that have those decorative flags that kind of welcome you to the town. It's more of a town statement. And I know we don't own those poles. So again, it would be working with the whoever, like NCDOT or whatever, but something on that corridor, on the commercial corridor, that would be decorative. We went to a meeting, months ago, sponsored by the chamber, 13 ways to kill a community.
Beautification.
And one of the points that the speaker made was, it sounds a little, I don't know, corny or whatever, but it does. The little things do matter in terms of the attractiveness of your town. And so I think going forward, it would be nice if we could devote some thinking to those little things that would make our community attractive, in addition to the vibrancy issue.
Okay, cool, yeah.
One of the things also is advertising what we do. For instance, the Monarch Way Station, it's no place. Asheville's a bee community. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
And you can be registered as a bee town. We have people here, we might even qualify as of this point because we have people that have raised bees.
We have a guy at the table right now.
There he is. But
The mayor of
Asheville, for instance, advertises that now.
Yeah. Well, I would say
And the Monarch.
we have I'm dominating here at the end as I'm out the door to go to my mayor's lunch. We have a staff who is awesome. And they do things, that are just amazing. But we tend to not be, as a town, tooting our own horn.
Right.
And I think we could do a better job of that. And
We
again,
don't have a position for it.
we don't have a position
So,
for
I
it,
mean,
and that's part of the
larger
problem.
issue.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't have a public relations.
A PIO, we don't have
have what Doug has.
That's right, and that is a lot, we're talking about a lot of work.
It is,
Not-
it's
not
work.
to-
It's work.
Doug puts a lot on our community development office, and they do a wonderful job, but they wear way too many hats. If we go to our planning department, we get a permit in 3 days. You go to Duck, and it's not their fault, but it takes much longer because they're doing all these community development things. And if we would go down that road, I think we need to divide the tasks into responsible departments rather than trying to merge it under one. Because I think you end up overloading the individual staff members.
Well, before we wrap this up, I'd like to throw in the issues to be aware of that might negatively impact the town. I don't think we can avoid looking at environmental issues like climate change, sea rise, all these things that I certainly don't know the answers, but could there be negative impacts on our town moving forward? I certainly think we have to look at that.
If we want to be more vibrant and have a much more inviting atmosphere coming through town and driving up Duck Road, is that what we want? Do we want them to stop? Or is it just for the residents? It's rhetorical, I know.
Yeah, no, I know, it's a good question.
Do we want them to stop? We do not.
It makes me feel good when I see the little flags. That's-
I do too, when I drive through Duck, okay?
Yeah.
And all that, but
I just
Do
think
we
it's
have-
pretty.
Do we have because they're inviting them to stop and shop.
I'm
And
happy for them
take
to stop and
time,
shop.
Do we have anything to ask them to do that? We don't.
Yeah.
Hey, Ross.
And that would be something we could start the conversation
Or
with
Food
the,
Lion.
The-
And I'm
commercial
not
property.
against it or for it, but
Right.
when you come across that bridge, you got OBX Chevy, you got the stuff on the left, then you see the canal, then you see the town sign, then you see looking to the left, of course, then you see the golf course, and then there's a shopping center, then you're through town.
Well,
I mean, literally, so, but it's okay.
the last thing on
Yeah.
the list is the number one thing you want to accomplish over the next 5 or 10 years. And I think, I wrote it down. I said to strive for a balanced incremental growth model with the emphasis towards enhancing year-round resident population. Year-round. And that's what you're,
And make them more vibrant than they are today.
but more for us as residents than trying to just grab them off the street. And, there's a balance there.
I think that's where we gotta work with the associations, because they're filling those gaps right now. I think they are.
Sure.
They're trying to,
Yeah, there are parks and rec.
You're also seeing an economic trend that may continue. I think it's early to see is that a lot of our vacation cottages are being pulled into year-round residents. We've had an influx just in the last several years.
And a lot of residents have been pulled into Airbnb. There's been a lot.
I think we suffer from that less than other towns. I think most of what most of what I see is it's going the other way, and they're being pulled out of rental inventory. And I think if you talk to property managers, especially with our town, they'll see the same trend.
Yeah.
It's going in the other direction.
Well, and that would be something that we should certainly look at is some registration process for Airbnb type.
Would that be a land use plan thing though? Or-
Well, yeah, yes, and we don't have it now, like you said, but there's more and more in Southern Shores. And I'm not talking about regulating them down to zero. I'm just talking about a registration process that they're protected fairly well in the state, that type of business. But it's something that we need to consider in our long-range plan is how we do this shared ownership, short-term Airbnb type.
I wouldn't want to see a distinction for, it's either short-term rental or it's not, whatever the management structure is. I think it's unfair to differentiate between, we have the whole region short-term rentals that has been intrinsic in the town for a long time, and to then say, well, Airbnb, you're somehow different than what property managers have been operating for years and years and years. They're all regulated under Vacation Rental Act. That's the side issue in our land use plan, I think, but.
Yeah, well, we can argue about that on another day, but I truly.
Short-term rental growth, or to Andy's point, we're trying to focus the land use plan to be more available to year-round second home residents.
Sure.
Don't want to shortchange the short-term rentals by any means, but provide some access and resources to them that aren't currently available.
Back to values and priorities, because I follow a script here, so.
I went to the bottom because the mayor left.
That's right. But I like that one. I don't know where it fits into a land use plan, but safety is another reason I think people choose to live in Southern Shores, is that we consider this a safe community because of our emergency services and our fire department, but it's also just a safe community to bike in, mostly walk in. And I think that feeling of safety here is important and needs to be protected. And then that kind of leads into accessibility of, having an optimum number of bike paths and walking trails and those things that citizens like.
The bike paths are in poor condition here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that right
Many
now.
of
I
them.
ride them. And
Well,
then
that's what
on
you do.
158, you got it's this wide, the bike path. And, don't put your elbows out when you're biking. So that
So I think we
definitely,
need to look at that, yeah.
They're owned by the by the associations and the town, right? Is there a combination?
No,
No?
the bike path on 158 and a walking path on 158, not 158, Route 12,
Route 12, okay.
that's owned by the town.
That's all right.
Only maintain.
I'm sorry, not 158.
Anything that's in town right of way is
Yep.
owned by the town. The ones that cut up, in different areas, they are civic.
Yeah, associations.
And there are some poor ones in there.
Just going back to challenges, because this is in my mind is overall stormwater conveyance within town. And management plans for that. And it's more of a county and then a state and then a national issue, but workforce housing and housing availability and diversity of housing stock. We all talk about low density, and to me, that means occupants, doesn't mean necessarily structures or things like that. And we've always, we've got different covenants in town within the property deeds. You have some covenants that allow for guest houses or auxiliary structures, and then you got some covenants in other parts of town where it's one single dwelling. And I would like to see our zoning kind of match where those covenants are rather than a one size fits all throughout town.
To make the potential for more workforce housing.
Or just a varied housing stock. I mean, if you're trying to fit 14 occupants on a half-acre piece of land, could 6 of them be in one structure and the other 6 in another structure, or the other 8 in another? I mean, it's what is the ultimate difference, and if all the other zoning means are met? And I mean, what we buck against here with something like that too is again the overall deed restrictions that are attached to the covenants, because there's some areas where that's not even going to be available.
Right.
But I think you would have a different investment model and encourage a more varied investment with some of the people that are looking at this property just as an investment potential, and it might provide a different housing stock. Or if people are trying to maximize investment in a piece of property right now, we force them to kind of build the largest home they can, fit as many people as they can. I'd like to offer them a different avenue if they can take it, and you're starting to see elements of that elsewhere in Dare County.
That's a change, Matt.
That is-
Like change.
Probably not a popular one, but
No,
it's a challenge we're gonna have to
What it would be for
tackle.
me is I would say I'm a former builder, but I'm not a current builder like you are, but, to me, less is more. And people know getting in what the rules are here, as far as development goes. And they're not buying a piece of property thinking, oh, well, maybe I can,
Well, at some
put
point, the
20
rules
acres or
change. I
something.
mean, most Ocean Boulevard, right in the covenants, it clearly says guest house.
Sure.
I mean, it's right there.
Yeah, but that's a covenant. It's not a.
Well, at some point, that was what the governing principle of the town was, and then at some point, the town incorporated and shifted. And if you had an oceanfront and you had an option of a 3-story, 35-foot tall, 50 by 50 box that has 7 bedrooms, where you could have a nice primary dwelling up near the dune and a secondary guest home, I mean, I think that would be a better use of that property.
Like I said, you can't legislate pretty.
No. But you can give them opportunities so they're not forced down one direction.
But Matt does raise that issue of kind of the sustainability of tourism on all of the Outer Banks, and that's something that may have a negative impact moving forward, because people need to be able to afford to live here, to teach, to work in the service industry, to,
Police the streets,
pardon?
be policemen,
Right.
work in the town.
So you don't want to, so I think that's a challenge going, not just for us, but for everybody.
I think the tourism board is looking at, they've
Right.
got somebody they're working with right now that says we're probably maxed out or over maxed. As a lot of banks.
Well, I mean, because it's great to talk about a
In terms
vibrant
of
community, but if
tourism,
your restaurants
yeah.
can't stay open because there's nobody
Yep.
to cook and serve, then there
Right.
goes your vibrancy.
Well, it may be a situation where Southern Shores, once again, would partner with another county, Currituck, and, the land's cheaper over there. It's less dense, and, as goodwill, we could, help fund maybe a countywide project that would build affordable housing over the bridge. I don't know. I mean, it's just, this is long-term stuff. This
Right.
isn't, you know, it's a short-term problem right now because we're seeing it, we're feeling it coming out of COVID, but it's real, and
Oh, yeah.
we need to do something about it, or at least help.
Right. Well, I like it.
We could do this all day.
I like that we got to, yeah, I like we got to opportunities. We got to, you know, almost get to priorities. I like that we have some good dialogue and some different ideas, but looking for solutions, and that's really nice to find. So thank you all for your time this morning. We're gonna have to probably close this down so we can run the staff in here and talk to them. And I know you all have other things to do, but really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. This will be good stuff. So I hope I see y'all, some of y'all tonight at the meeting, or at the very least, send your neighbors and friends. Appreciate it.
You know,
Tony, yes, go.